books that priests confiscated and burned, books that monarchs sealed inside royal archives, books that scholars copied in secret and signed with false names. The Vatican Apostolic Archive still holds several under restricted access, unavailable to the general public without formal scholarly petition. We call them grimoires. And here is the part that almost nobody seems to want to discuss honestly. These hierarchies were never designed to frighten. They were designed to govern. The names you must never pronounce, the sigils you must never trace, the pacts you must never sign. Tonight you are getting 9 of these books, one system from each, and the hierarchies their authors built to organize what they believed lay beneath the visible world. 9 different texts, 9 different structures, and almost no 2 of them agree. What follows is esoteric tradition and religious folklore. Read closely. I am not making metaphysical claims, but the same warnings surface, century after century, in books that never met each other, and some patterns persist for reasons we do not entirely understand. That is worth taking seriously, even if you take nothing else from this video. These sources still matter because institutions still treat them as dangerous. The Vatican Apostolic Archive restricts access to several key manuscripts. The Bavarian State Library keeps others catalogued, but not freely circulated. Museums in London and Paris hold copies that required legal negotiations to digitize. This material did not stay locked away by accident. If the darker corners of esoteric history fascinate you, subscribe. Every week, we read what was never meant to be read. Now, let us begin with the most structured demonic government ever committed to paper. Pull up a map of Paris in the early 18th century. Somewhere in that city, the exact printer is still disputed. A text was circulating under a name that made booksellers nervous: the Grand Grimoire. Some editions carried the subtitle, The Red Dragon. The earliest surviving printed copies date to around 1750, though scholars including Ian Magliocco and the historian Owen Davies have argued the manuscript tradition behind it is older, possibly reaching back into the late 17th century. No single authoritative manuscript number exists the way it does for some of the texts we will visit later in this video. What we have instead is a print tradition, copied, sold under the counter, and occasionally confiscated by French authorities, who considered it a public nuisance at minimum and a serious theological threat at most. The Grand Grimoire is not subtle about what it is doing. It presents a complete administrative structure for the infernal realm. 3 supreme rulers sit at the top. Lucifer holds the first seat, Beelzebub holds the second, Astaroth holds the third. Beneath them, a ranked hierarchy of subordinate spirits, each with specific jurisdictions, specific powers, and specific protocols for contact. The legend continues that the text was dictated, or at least organized, by a figure called Alabek the Egyptian, though no historical record of this person exists outside the grimoire itself. Supposedly, the original document was discovered in Jerusalem in 1750, though the tradition tells us this with the kind of precision that should make any historian pause. The detail is there to lend authority, not to survive scrutiny. But here is the line that has unsettled magicians for 400 years. The Grand Grimoire states, in its pact clause, that the operator who reads the binding aloud becomes, in the moment of reading, a party to the agreement. The text does not say you are summoning something, it says you are signing something. Read that again. You are not the caller, you are the signatory. I want you to notice what it does not say. It does not say the spirit agrees, it says you have agreed. The burden of the contract, according to the text's own internal logic, falls entirely on the human side of the exchange. Not the ritual, not the circle, the signature. And the signature is your voice. There is a secondary clause that the tradition treats as equally serious. The operator cannot stop mid-sentence once the pact clause has begun. The legend holds that pausing, even to breathe incorrectly, voids the protective framework of the ritual and leaves the practitioner exposed. Whether you read this as psychological pressure, as a mnemonic device to force memorization, or as something else entirely, the structural effect is the same. The text is designed to make hesitation feel fatal. Now the name at the top of that 3-seat government, Lucifer, from the Latin lux fer, to carry light. It is a title before it is a name, and it appears in the Vulgate Bible in Isaiah 14:12, applied to a Babylonian king in a passage about pride and downfall. Jerome's translation made the metaphor literal. The light-bearer became a proper noun, and the proper noun became, across centuries of theological elaboration, the figure the Grand Grimoire places on the first throne. There is no historical pact document that survives from any practitioner who used this text. No signed contract. No notarized agreement between a human and an infernal entity. The Grand Grimoire's legal framework exists entirely on paper. What fascinates me about the legend, though, is its internal logic. The text is not asking you to believe in demons, it is asking you to behave as though contracts have consequences. That is a very old idea, and it is not an irrational one. One more thing before we leave Paris. The three-seat government, Lucifer, Beelzebub, Astaroth, is not random. Each name carries a specific theological history, a specific origin culture, and a specific set of attributed powers. The Grand Grimoire did not invent these figures. It inherited them, organized them, and gave them job titles. That act of bureaucratic imagination is, in its own way, more unsettling than any ritual instruction the book contains. The system is not designed to be safe, it is designed to be survived. Now step out of the Grand Grimoire's Parisian shadow and walk into the reading rooms of the British Library in London. Somewhere in their collection of manuscripts and early printed books, you can trace the lineage of a text that has been copied, corrupted, translated, and argued over for nearly 4 centuries. The Lesser Key of Solomon, known in its most infamous section as the Ars Goetia, is a 17th century grimoire, compiled from older sources and circulated in manuscript form before Aleister Crowley and Samuel Liddell, MacGregor Mathers, produced their printed edition in 1904. That edition, published under the imprint of the Society for the Propagation of Religious Truth, is the version most people encounter today. And it is not entirely the same as what came before. The legend attached to the Ars Goetia runs deep. The tradition tells us that King Solomon himself bound 72 spirits inside a brass vessel, sealed it, and cast it into a lake. Supposedly, Babylonian priests later recovered the vessel, expecting treasure, and broke the seal. The legend continues that the spirits escaped and returned to their original stations, but not before leaving behind a record of their names, their ranks, and their powers. Whether you find that story credible or not, what matters is what the text does with it. It uses that legend as a certificate of authenticity. Solomon bound them once, the logic goes, which means they can be bound again. The Ars Goetia lists 72 spirits, each assigned a military rank: president, duke, marquis, earl, king. The system is not random. It mirrors the structure of a Renaissance European court, which tells you something important about who was writing these texts and what kind of power they were imagining. And the first name on the list, the very first entry in the entire taxonomy, is Baal. Here is the line that has unsettled magicians for 400 years. He maketh thee to go invisible. Read that again. He maketh thee. Not he teaches, not he shows, not he grants permission. Maketh. Active, causative, present tense. The grammar of that sentence is a grammar of compulsion. I want you to notice what it does not say. It does not say he will make thee invisible if conditions are right, or if the ritual is performed correctly, or if the operator is worthy. It says he maketh, as if the outcome is structural, as if invisibility is simply what Baal does, the way a hammer drives nails. Not the request, the function. And Baal does not come alone. The text assigns him 66 legions of spirits under his command. A Roman legion numbered somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 soldiers. Do the arithmetic if you want to. The number is not the point. The point is the scale of the claim. The first entry in the hierarchy does not describe a minor spirit. It describes something the text treats as a general. Baal, the name itself, is the clue. From the Semitic root Baal, meaning lord or master. It was a divine title used across the ancient Near East, applied to storm gods, local deities, fertility figures. The Israelite prophets in the Hebrew Bible weaponized it as an insult, collapsing an entire category of competing religion into one condemned name. By the time the Ars Goetia was compiled, Baal had traveled from divine title to demonic proper noun. A word that once meant lord became a name that meant enemy. Now, here is what the historical record actually shows. Aleister Crowley's 1904 edition of the Ars Goetia changed at least 3 words from the manuscript versions that preceded it. Scholars, including Joseph Peterson, who produced the critical edition in 2001, have spent considerable effort identifying exactly which variants Crowley introduced and which he inherited. The argument has not been resolved. What fascinates me about that dispute is what it reveals about the text's authority. Practitioners who use the Ars Goetia for ritual purposes generally do not care which version is historically prior. They care which version works. That is a completely different epistemology. and it is one the original compilers would have understood perfectly. Baal commands 66 legions and makes you invisible. The grammar says so. The question is what you do with a grammar like that. From the British Library, we need to travel south and back in time. Not to a manuscript room, to a fortress. The Fortalitium Fidei, the Fortress of Faith, is not a building, it is a book. Written by Alfonso de Spina, a Franciscan friar and bishop, and completed around 1467. It is one of the most systematically organized demonologies produced in the 15th century. De Spina was writing in Spain, in the years immediately preceding the formal establishment of the Spanish Inquisition. The Fortalitium Fidei was not a work of mysticism, it was a work of institutional theology, and it contains one of the most granular demonic taxonomies in the entire tradition. The legend surrounding De Spina is quieter than most in this series. The tradition does not give him a dramatic confrontation or a sealed vessel. What it gives him is method. Supposedly, De Spina compiled his taxonomy from earlier theological sources, Augustine, Isidore of Seville, earlier inquisitorial manuals, and organized them into 9 distinct categories of demon, each defined by its mode of operation rather than its name or rank. The legend continues that the categories were designed not for ritual use, but for legal use. If you were an inquisitor trying to determine what kind of supernatural interference a defendant had allegedly experienced, De Spina's 9 degrees gave you a diagnostic framework, a checklist, a taxonomy built for a courtroom, not a conjuring circle. The category that stops me every time I return to this text is the 8th. De Spina calls them vessels of iniquity, and what makes them distinct from every other category in the list is this: they do not inhabit people, they inhabit objects. But before we get to that, here is the line from the Fortalitium Fidei that defines the first and highest order of demons in De Spina's system. Falsi di, the false gods, who desire to be worshipped as gods, and who were worshipped by the pagans. Let that sit for a moment. False gods, not fallen angels, not rebel spirits. False gods, a category defined entirely by what they claim to be. I want you to notice the distinction De Spina is drawing. He is not saying these entities are weak. He is saying they are fraudulent. That is a very specific theological charge. It means the highest-ranking demons in his system are not the most powerful. They are the most deceptive, the ones who convinced entire civilizations to build temples to them. Not the servants, the imposters. Beelzebub sits comfortably in this tradition. The name is worth unpacking. Baal-Zebub, Lord of Flies. It appears in the Hebrew Bible in the 2nd book of Kings, where it is used as a mocking designation for the god of Ekron, and the mockery is deliberate. The original name may have been Baal-Zebul, Lord of the High Place, or Lord of the Exalted Dwelling. Scribes changed one letter, one vowel, and turned a divine title into an insult about insects, a name that is itself an act of editorial contempt. Now, here is the historical reality of Alfonso de Spina. He was not a mystic recording visions. He was an inquisitor, building a legal instrument. His 9 categories of demons served the same function as a modern diagnostic manual. They gave institutional authority a shared vocabulary for classifying threats. The skeptic's objection is correct. Nothing in the Fortalitium Fidei constitutes evidence of supernatural activity. It is a taxonomy of accusations. But what fascinates me about that framing is how durable it proved. De Spina's categories were cited, adapted, and echoed for more than a century after his death. A legal instrument became a theological inheritance. A taxonomy built to prosecute the living ended up cataloguing the dead. From 15th century Spain, we move forward roughly 60 years, and north across the Alps into the intellectual ferment of Renaissance Germany. If you were to visit the Cologne State Archives today, you would find traces of a man who managed to be condemned by the church, celebrated by scholars, and plagiarized by practically everyone who came after him. Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa von Nettesheim published the 3 books of occult philosophy in 1531 in Cologne, though the work had circulated in manuscript form as early as 1510. It is one of the most comprehensive attempts in Western history to systematize all of occult knowledge, astrology, Kabbalah, natural magic, ceremonial magic, into a single coherent framework. And buried in its 3rd book is a demonic hierarchy of 9 orders that does something no other taxonomy in this series attempts. It mirrors heaven. The legend attached to Agrippa is almost too convenient. The tradition tells us that he kept a black dog named Monsieur that was actually a demon in animal form, an accusation that appeared in print within years of his death. Supposedly, On his deathbed, Agrippa removed the dog's collar and said, "Begone, wretched animal, thou who hast been the cause of my ruin." The legend continues that the dog ran to the river Saone and drowned itself. I want to be precise. There is no contemporary evidence for this story. It was recorded by Johann Weyer, who had been Agrippa's student, and Weyer himself was skeptical of it. What the story does is transform a scholar into a cautionary figure. It takes a man who spent his life systematizing occult knowledge and turns his death into a moral verdict. Agrippa's 9 infernal orders are structured as deliberate inversions of 9 celestial orders. For every rank of angel, he proposes a corresponding rank of demon. The symmetry is not decorative, it is the argument. Here is the line from the 3 books that names one of the most operationally significant categories in his system. Deceitful spirits, who feign themselves gods, and by their wonders create false religions. Read that again. Feign themselves gods. Agrippa is using almost exactly the same language as Despina's false gods category, but with a critical difference. Despina's demons wanted worship. Agrippa's demons fabricate entire religious systems. They are not just receiving false devotion, they are engineering it. The architects, not the recipients, not the idol, the blueprint. Asmodeus appears in Agrippa's framework, and the name carries the oldest etymology in this entire series. Ashma Dayava. It is Avestan, the ancient Iranian language of the Zoroastrian scriptures. Ayeshma is the demon of wrath, of violence, of the raging spear. Dayava is the Avestan word for a false god, a being that demands worship it does not deserve. When the name crossed from Avestan into Hebrew as Asmodai, and then into Greek and Latin, it brought its entire theological freight with it. A demon of wrath, born in a tradition older than the Hebrew Bible, older than the Christian canon, older than almost every other source we have discussed in this video, the oldest named entity in the hierarchy, and still present in Agrippa's Renaissance German taxonomy, 1700 years after the Avestan texts that first recorded him. Now, here is what Agrippa himself said about the 3rd book of his own work. He called portions of it spurious, not metaphorically. He wrote, in a letter, that material had been added to the manuscript without his knowledge, and that the published version contained things he had not written. The tradition kept it anyway. Scholars, including Vittorio Peroni Compagni, who produced the critical Latin edition in 1992, have spent decades trying to determine what Agrippa actually wrote and what was interpolated. The dispute is still open. But what fascinates me about Agrippa's own disclaimer is this. A man who spent his life building a system of occult knowledge looked at the finished product and said, "That part is not mine," and nobody listened. The most dangerous frameworks are the ones that outlive their architect's objections. I need to pause here. The word count instructions contain a direct contradiction that makes the task impossible to complete as specified. The writing directions for section 7 ask for 150 to 280 words with multiple structural beats, named devices, and a verbatim tricolon return. The key points then specify a strict word count of 7 to 10 words. Those 2 requirements cannot both be satisfied simultaneously.